As hundreds of thousands of Israeli reservists have been called up, many Americans volunteering to help those on active duty. And we're joined now by Rich Sokol, who spent 3 weeks in Israel. He's working in the fields, helping to feed the troops, doing all kinds of things. Thanks for joining us, Rich. We appreciate it. This all started for you going over there and trying to help in any way you can. Bring us back to the beginning there after October 7th. Now your daughter is living over there, right?
That's right, Kyle, and thank you for having me. So my daughter just graduated from high school, and she's spending her gap year in Jerusalem. And my wife and I have numerous members of our family that live in Israel, and I lived in Israel when I was younger, so we feel very attached to Israel. You know, the Israelis are all our brothers and sisters. And quite frankly, when someone in your family is hurting and there's been a catastrophe like Israel faced, these are our brothers and sisters, so we drop everything and we go help
So you
just
went
like
there
anyone would with their family.
for 3 weeks, right? I mean, we saw, you're out in the fields helping people, helping to feed the troops, volunteering in any way you could. I mean, tell us about some of the things you did when you were over there for 3 weeks.
So thanks. Uh, I did numerous volunteer activities. Probably the best thing I did is I hooked up with a group called Unity Warriors, who is involved in getting gear to the troops on the front line. Everything from flashlights to medical tourniquets, you name it. What they're doing is really saving lives. So they organized with me two things. One is we had a barbecue for some of the troops. I'd like to say that my barbecue skills are what drove people to the barbecue. Obviously, that had nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
It was the first hot meal, though, the troops that we saw had had in 2 weeks. But I think what they really appreciated most was just the camaraderie. It was just having an American be there. So all the troops have read about all the pro-Palestinian protests going on in America and around the world, and they are just bewildered by how someone could be doing that at this time. This is such a clear-cut case of good versus evil, and we have to choose sides. I'm on the side of Israel because that is the side of good. So those soldiers were just so thankful for us to be there, to put our arms around them, to say, hey, we care, we support you, we're here, you guys are doing God's work, you're doing good, and we're with you 100% of the way.
I'm guessing when you first got there, they felt all of that support, the global support, but I wonder if it changed at all in the 3 weeks you were there, to your point, watching what was going on around the world. Did they feel like their support from the rest of the world was slipping away? And if so, did anyone express that to you or tell you how it made them feel? Or?
Absolutely, yeah, it did feel so. Right when I got there, President Biden came.
Mm-hmm.
That was terrific. Everyone in Israel was so appreciative of the U.S. president coming. Also, very appreciative of the two U.S. warships in the Mediterranean because we have to deter Hezbollah from getting into the war. And U.S. standing with Israel is the only thing that's preventing Hezbollah from entering the war and creating tens of thousands of casualties on both sides. So it really seemed like the U.S. was with Israel. But after a few days, we started to see the protests, and they've grown and grown and grown across the world. And Israelis are looking at this and can't understand why. Israel has the most moral army in the world and is doing everything they can to avoid civilian casualties. Obviously, there are going to be civilian casualties, which breaks everyone's heart. But the difference between Israel and Hamas is Hamas targets civilians while Israel does everything it can to avoid civilian casualties. So a lot of the Israeli soldiers expressed to me saying, don't the people know? Don't they understand what we're up against, the barbaric evil of Hamas, and that we're doing everything we can to avoid civilian casualties? There's no Israeli soldier that wants to kill a civilian, that takes joy in killing civilians like the Hamas terrorists do. They put themselves at risk to avoid civilian casualties, and we are just bewildered that the rest of the world doesn't see this.
Now, there is a lot of support certainly in the American Jewish community and in many communities across the United States and in other parts of the world still for Israel. When you were there, was what you were doing unique, or did you see a lot of people, coming from different areas trying to help out and do what you were doing as well? I mean, did you have company?
So I had some company. I would say early on, there was very, very few Americans there. There was, on the flight over, it was me and one other guy, when usually half the plane is American. Right. But so there weren't many foreigners there at all, at least in the beginning. There's a lot more coming now. The situation is a little more stable now. But I would say while I was volunteering, there were so many Israelis volunteering. I saw the most unbelievable number. it said that almost half of Israelis not serving in the military have volunteered in one way or another since the war began. So everywhere I went, there were tons of volunteers. For example, I went to a pomegranate farm because all the farmers are hurting in Israel. They don't have the workers that they normally have. So I cut pomegranates and picked pomegranates for a day. There were over 100 volunteers there the day I was there. And that's happening all around Israel. There's so many centers where people are collecting clothes and food for the displaced families. People are bringing things to the soldiers, such as Unity Warriors. Everyone is involved in the war effort in one way or another.
It's interesting because I'm sure you follow Israeli politics anyway. Before the war, there was so much division over the judicial system and what have you with the Netanyahu government. But you're saying when you were there, you felt, unity. You felt like everybody was, on the same page, so to speak. What was your observations coming in as an outsider, coming in from America and seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Israel is absolutely unified. It is such a shame that it took such a catastrophic event like this and all the death and destruction to unify Israel. But that has certainly happened. There's every Israeli wants to see or hopes and prays for the destruction of Hamas, as we all should, because we should all pray for the destruction of evil. So Israel today is unified. The issues of the past, the judicial reform, that's all behind us. That'll be for another day in Israeli governance to decide. But today, everything is focused on winning the war, and those issues will come later.
I guess I would ask you one more thing from your perspective is that what would you say to people here who want to help? And, are there ways for them to help? What did you learn? And what would you pass on to someone else who's in a similar spot?
Sure. Well, first, go to Israel if you can. I think that's the best thing. Just your physical presence there, showing up, telling people you care, that's worth more than anything else we could do. Prayer is always a good thing. Never going to say no to prayer. But there's a myriad of organizations to donate to. I can't believe how many volunteer organizations have sprung up from the grassroots, nothing government organized. This is all the people just getting together to help their brothers and sisters in arms. So one is Unity Warriors that I mentioned, but there's plenty of others. There's Friends of the IDF. There's the Jerusalem Civil Command Center. It won't be hard to find an organization that's doing great, great work on the ground.
Well, you did your part and then some, it sounds like. Rich, thank you so much for coming on with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.